if you're unemployed or you're on Social Security and that kind of thing, and you absolutely can't afford it, send an email to Kathy at Half Past Human and explain that, and we'll send you a free copy.
Oh, that's great. Half Past Human. 888-663-6386. What's your first name? Where are you calling from?
Scott, Los Angeles.
Scott, go ahead.
Hey, Cliff. Well, first, it would be really cool if you would make an appearance again in GLP voice chat. That was great when you did that in the past.
With the gulpers, yeah, okay.
Yeah, no doubt.
What are the gulpers?
It's a forum, the GLP, and of course you put in a U in there, gulp.
I see.
Yeah, but anyhow, it was very entertaining in the interaction and all that. Cliff, I got a few questions for you. I'm just going to kind of spit them out. A couple reports ago, you indicated that there would be something significant on 7/7, the first 10 days of August of this year. And let me just end that by saying that if you're right about what's coming in November, then you probably won't be selling any more reports. But
what's coming in November?
Hold on. But would you agree, Cliff, that if you are wrong about November, you probably won't be selling any more reports?
Oh, wait a minute. Here,
I would agree, yes. I would agree in both cases.
Okay. What are you predicting? What are you forecasting for November?
We have a tipping point that shows up in our data. Tipping point, the last time we had one was September 11th of 2001. The tipping point we have now is similar to that tipping point in that all the entities are shoving all these data sets together and aggregating and congregating in a dense mass around November 8th that continues until November 11th when it breaks loose, and then we get about 2+ months of release language. The odds don't favor selling reports after that, simply because if I'm correct, if I'm wrong, it's, boy, my data is way off and I've got to retool everything. Because this is such a clear indicator that something big-ish is going to impact us.
Something as big as September 11th.
Much larger than September 11th, which was an engineered attack by the powers that be on the populace. And it was all engineered from the get-go all the way through. No, something very large is coming. It also has participation in our case from in November from the Terra entity, and I don't see that as being part of a false flag. So it may be coincident. We may have, a freak hurricane at the same time that we have global thermonuclear war, but it's also the Terra entity is also going to impact us in November in part of the tipping point in some way.
If you were on a game show and had to guess? What do you think it is? What do the linguistics say it is?
The closest thing I can anticipate at this stage is that the Israelis attack Iran, and there is a huge, bloody 4-day war, and it takes us 2 months to sort out all the dead.
Wow. What's the price of oil?
It's immaterial.
Hey, Cliff.
Wait, what do you mean by immaterial?
That at the point that the war goes off, there won't be enough of a regular society thereafter for the cost of oil to be meaningful. There won't be deliveries of oil, so why worry about it?
A regular society here?
Yeah, sure, because we're talking about something where there is such a total... most of our military is killed in the Middle East in the first 4 days. Half of the Israeli Air Force is destroyed in the first, probably 30 minutes, if I'm correct about how I'm reading the data interpretation, which I'm probably not, so it's okay to talk about it. 4 cities in Israel become glass. There's a radioactive something. I want to say that the Israelis use a bunker buster. They miss, and they cause an oil volcano again in Iran to start spewing radioactive smoke that impacts most of Indonesia and the Chinese and Vietnamese coastlines, and all the way up into Siberia, and then it comes across into Alaska, although it's less radioactive at that point. But you see my point. It's a really nasty situation. So I'm sure I'm quite wrong, because anything I can imagine would not happen. I did not imagine the circumstances that developed from September 11th, but I was accurate in that there was an attack on the money center, and George and I discussed the attack on the money center days and weeks before the actual attack on September 11th. So but I didn't, at the time, it never would have occurred to me to associate the Twin Towers with the money of the planet.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I would have seen it as an attack on New York, maybe, or something like that, as opposed to an attack on those specific buildings.
Right.
So the fact that I'm seeing this in a broad brush means that it'll be very much smaller than I anticipate. However, what is clear is the 2 months of release language afterwards. And so there will be a large involvement of the populace of the planet discussing whatever it was that occurred in November.
Hey, Cliff.
Yeah.
With regard to August, the first 10 days of August and July 7th,
Yeah.
can you expand on what we saw or didn't see?
In August, there was all kinds of stuff that occurred. The issue for us is the level of visibility probably won't be visible until the end of September. In other words, the derivative crises that we're about to undergo had their roots in what was occurring in the first 10 days of August, and it seriously impacted the Obama administration, although we did not see it and probably won't see it hit the language until the end of the month. It might be even into October or more. But apparently what has happened is the crisis in confidence, or whatever, however you want to say it, for the entire derivatives mess reached a critical point in those first 10 days of August, and we're actually in another phase of it right now. And the problem is this: the European banks, or the European credit situation, is just the excuse for what's going on. Every so often, it used to be every 3 months, and then it's eventually ratcheted down now to where it's happening every 2 weeks. If you follow the stock market, you'll see that it's in this 2-week period of almost a sine wave, up and down, and then relative to the language being used, I don't know about the prices. But the issue right at the moment is the European debt crisis. Well, 2 weeks ago it was we had an issue that caused this anxiety. So the quote recovery will never extend beyond 2 weeks. We're in a cycle that is ratcheting down, and when the periodicity of the cycle reaches a certain point, that's when we get into the continuous crises. And by my thinking, it'll probably be around the end of October. Now, there's one other thing that occurred in August that we cannot lose sight of, and that is that on August 1, we had that solar whatever, okay, that NASA doesn't even have a name for it. It was so violent and everything. That solar storm was predicted by Patrick Garrell's work. It was coincident with all the other stuff that was going on, and whether or not there's any astro relationship to it is immaterial, but it will reoccur also coincidentally on October 27th. We'll get another one of those. And so in the background, the fact that it was predicted and the fact that it occurred with the level of violence that it did has a whole lot of the shadow people and the powers that be really, the minions more than the powers that be, are really upset. And there's a lot of language leaking out about that. So I think that was perhaps the largest precipitating crisis we've got.
Look out.
Yeah, and if we're correct, and it happens again on October 27th, that's close enough to the 8th through the 11th that you could maybe stretch your imagination around the idea that something happens relative to the sun on the 27th of October that precipitates or causes the tipping point. That would be the best of all worlds. If the sun would come along and kick our butts, then at least it's not a global thermonuclear war.
Wow. So it's so funny the way you put the November 8th thing. You said, you're sure it's going to happen, it's probably not going to happen. That's
No, I'm sure that there's going to be the impact and the language is going to show up, but the specifics that my monkey mind can generate now won't actually occur that way. George Ure and I would read we always start at a very high level at the archetypes and work our way down towards detail. And I would read these things, and George and I would discuss them, and then we would always come to the conclusion, well, because we can think of that, it won't actually manifest just that way, because universe likes surprise. And we've been accurate on the archetypes. For instance, for months we had this huge archetype thing developing for the United States of maritime disaster this, maritime disaster that, more references to oceanic disaster and so on. And I thought, geez, what's going on here? You know, are we going to have one of our aircraft carriers sink or whatever? Well, it turned out to be the Columbia spaceship explosion. because Columbia, Gem of the Ocean, all the archetypes were there, the disaster, the emotional impact, the debris, all of the descriptors fit, but at the time that it was occurring, because it was associated with an archetype that had more maritime than any other association, it instantly drew my monkey mind to something occurring with the sea, and I never would have thought to look towards the space shuttle, which of course is a spaceship, and you get the idea.
Yeah. Anything else, Scott?
Well, yeah, actually, two things, and thanks for keeping me on.
That's okay, because it's been so loud here with the rain, I've been letting you talk.
Right on.
Okay.
Cliff, this is somewhat... have you picked up any language with regard to Gary McKinnon? Are you familiar with Gary McKinnon?
Sure, I know who McKinnon is, yeah.
Okay, and do you have any kind of thumbnail sketch on what you think of his situation is?
I think he's not a hacker. I think he's a poor fellow who took advantage of holes that our stupid military guys left in the machinery and stomped around as anybody did with curiosity. I don't think he'll end up being prosecuted here in the U.S. and being associated with that part of things. Our data doesn't show that level of resolution. I'm reluctant to go into personal projections, though.
Cliff, do you feel that he actually stumbled onto what is rumored that he stumbled onto?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah, that I have no doubt.
What did he stumble onto?
Gary McKinnon is a guy who lives in England, unemployed. He's a kid relative to me, so he's like under 30. Mm-hmm. And he is a good computer guy, and he discovered that the government had bunches of servers of theirs that had the word password as the password for control. And so he would go into these servers, and he was looking for space alien stuff at NASA. And what he discovered was an extraterrestrial space fleet, a secret space program, if you will, and some of the records that support the interfleet transfer of personnel and goods and so on. Now, that's what he reported, and he's been very tight-lipped and very circumspect about what he's actually said. So he's given out no details beyond just broad sketches here. And I commend him for that. He was not out blabbing out classified information. He was just trying to satisfy his curiosity. And so he's not an evil, not a person with evil intent or a hacker in that regard. Now, I know he's accurate because I see these things. I've got these third generation night vision goggles, and when it's not pouring the rain here and I can get out and look an hour or so after dusk, I can see a secret space program going on over my head, a mere 145 miles away. So I know he found accurate information, and he's not giving anybody disinfo about that.
Well, thanks, Scott. We're shocked about that. Hey, what's your first name? Where are you calling from? Hello? 888-663-6386. Okay, let's see. Got lots of other emails here. Cliff, could you provide feedback on near-death experiences? YouTube videos describe similar experiences by traveling through a tunnel of light, communicating with a beam of light called Godhead, and shown in the Garden of Eden. Also, what data do you have for Chicago? Oh, near-death experiences in Chicago. That's great. I like it. You know, these people, they're thinking.
They're specific there, yeah.
And have you had a near-death experience? I have.
I've been near death frequently, but I've never had what they call a near-death experience.
Yeah, I went through the whole tunnel thing and all. Man, it was great.
Yeah, well, it's probably similar to some of the meditative experiences I've had. So
right.
You know, and it makes sense in an energetic reality. But bear in mind that for the vast majority of this, you are the microscope. At some point, the light's going to be switched off, and whoever is looking through you is really who you are. The body that is going to go through the death part is immaterial in more than one sense of the word. So near-death experience is fine, but it more relates to the body and all of that than anything persistent.
Okay. What's your first name? Where are you calling from?
Hello.
Hi. Go ahead. You're on the air.
Hey, Cliff. This is the unruly one.
Oh, how you doing? Yeah.
Pretty good. Hey, listen. I was wondering if you're familiar with universal signatures and what your understanding of those are and what the ramifications might be for altering those, and what your thoughts might be on someone who claims to possess the ability and or technology to create a universal signature or alter one.
Okay, you got a kind of a bad line. We're going to let you listen on your computer. Universal signatures, Clif High. What are those?
There's a couple of different words that, or